Today, July 17th, 2020, and I had to pull away the landscape fabric from underneath these blue spruce trees along our property at 755 Hillside. The arborist came over here this week and told us that this tree is not dead. That the one that the neighbors complained about, it's still alive. You can clearly see that. And he strongly advised us not to cut it down. He didn't just say don't cut it, he strongly advised against cutting it. There's 7 spruces along each side of the driveway, and they do have root systems that work with each other. I'm not cutting this tree down. I'll go toe to toe if I have to. Also, the wood chips were not complained about. You can see that the front yard is cut and maintained. The tree branches are allowed to hang down that low if they're not over the driveway. We have a nice magnolia here. I'm going to go in a little bit closer so you can see, maybe not from a street view, but from up close, that we have native perennials here that are pollinator called cup plant. They're not considered herbaceous or weedy or grass or weeds. They are actually a beneficial native perennial. Queen Anne's lace is allowed. Now these are the ones, the cup plants that the deer have browsed on, but they're still not considered weeds. They just don't look great because of that. And next to them are a type of sunflower. So I'm going to go over here. Now this spot is one I think needs to be trimmed, right here. This is one little spot that, it's like a little mound here at the corner of the southeast part of the property. Along here too, I would say that some of these rye have, which we did actually put in to restore the soil, could be cut back. So there's 2 little spots there that are not even an issue for them on the other side of our house. So they really can't complain about it. Here we've been putting down wood chips. We've been planting a lot of new trees. Over here we have a protected Rose of Sharon that's fenced off, a lot of mint and fern. And then back in there we have some black-eyed Susan, coneflower, bergamot. Everything here is medicinal, edible, pollinator beneficial, not in the category of woody, herbaceous, weed, or noxious. That's a linden tree, that's a magnolia, this is our oriole feeder. This is a type of dogwood called red osier. This is more mint. And in about a week, it will be at its peak with pollinators all over it. And it is edible. So we're going to go over here to the other side. And I'm going to show another tree we planted. It's a black gum tupelo. Because our priority is not pleasing other people. Our priority is wildlife and maintaining a managed appearance. So I'm going to go back over here to the other side of the house. We have horse chestnut here. And over here we have a mix of Joe Pye, sweet Joe Pye actually, with pollinators on it. Bergamot, also edible and medicinal, which you make tea from. It smells great. And the Joe Pye is lighter colored as well as purple. I'm going to go back around over here. You can clearly see there's edge lines that are maintained and cut all along here. That's a semi-shade mix from a Prairie, Wisconsin nursery and not to be considered weeds. Now here's a little spot that I would probably cut. Another spot right here, just this rye. I'm not going to cut the bergamot. You see the pollinator on there over my dead body. We're not going to cut that. Here we have iron plant, which is really tall, and it gets profusions of dark purple flowers all over it. Again, not weeds, native perennial for the butterflies and caterpillars, and attractive, not ugly. Not considered a noxious weed, but a native perennial. I don't think that daisies are considered to be noxious weeds. Some of this stuff is being browsed on, like the Rose of Sharon and the mulberry. Mulberry keeps popping up and we have to keep transplanting it, but you can tell from the overall appearance of the back, there's really nothing that could be considered overgrown. Now there's one other area, and I just mentioned on the other side of the house 2 small areas that they could not have possibly been even aware of. You see how our grass is flat and we're allowed to do that as long as it's not standing up. But there's one spot over here between these two trees where the triplets kept bedding down for like a month or two, and we never got to cut. We did do a little hand cutting. It's very uneven and there's lots of tree roots in there. So we did do something this week to maintain it and make it shorter. The 6 to 8 inches is the city specification, but you can tell that they're still bedding down in here. And every time we come out to cut, there's triplets here. So it's pretty hard to cut when there's baby deer, 3 of them. This is our elderberry. Again, you can tell the ground underneath is only about 2 or 3 inches almost everywhere. There is one spot right there on this side of the button bush that is about 20 by 4 foot wide, and that was where they were bedding down before, and we did some hand weeding the top of it to get off the worst of it, and then we're going to mow it. But if you look all the way to the corner, it's maintained. Those two, the catalpa, and behind it a tiny maple. We are going to be moving the vegetation from around it, removing it, and then adding wood chips similar to what we're doing everywhere else, like where this elm tree is located. Here's our garden. You can see in here more cup plant, red ossie or dogwood, and blackberry, all edible, beneficial. More mint, which is allowed. And then we have a tree that I was given as a gift for Christmas, and it's grown twice the size. We put some chips around it. Here's another transplant, which is a flowering dogwood in shock from transplant, and we made it look very nicely maintained with wood chips around it. Over here is one last spot that I would say needs a little bit more maintenance. It's not even that bad, really. This is all the back. So here we have another elm transplant in shock, very nicely maintained around it with wood chips. This is a recent transplant, an apple tree that our friend gave us, and wood chips around it. Over here we have another transplant, a mulberry that was compromising the foundation, so we had to move it, and it's also in shock, but it has nice wood chips around it. Over here we have a swamp white oak from the Holden Arboretum that was put in last fall, and so it's we just did the crabapple, 2, a tiny maple. Over here another tiny maple transplant, that's 3. And then over here we have the catalpa is 4. And then the elderberry is 5 that need the wood chips. So again, this is another perspective on the grass on our property. There's the fire pit, which we stopped using. There's just a little bit of grass in there that needs to be cut, and you can see that area before that I was talking about behind it that's about 20 by 4 or 5 feet that needs to be cut. There were so many clover in there, we really didn't want to cut it because of all the bees. But the clover is starting to die. We have a nicely maintained compost pile for food. Underneath it is maintained. Over here, there's just a couple of burdock plants near the weed compost. And we have some covered wood piles that we're allowed to have. So again, I'm going to reiterate from the front in the beginning, the pine tree, spruce tree actually, along the driveway on the west side is not dead. The arborist said that he would be getting back to us with an official in writing telling us that we could use it for the city to explain the tree is not dead and it does not pose a hazard. Therefore, we're not required to cut it down. Also, the weeds and the grass overgrown in the back really begs the question, where? This is in the far back of our yard that only like maybe 2 properties can see, and it's clear that we have a nursery to maintain that takes up a lot of time and energy and water, especially lately in this drought. It's very hard to keep everything else perfect when we're trying to maintain the most important things for life. And this is the other side of our garden. Again, this is the cup plant. You can see in there I have some potted stuff. You can see my blackberries that I staked. You can see a little bee house, more cup plant. I do need to weed in there a little bit. But if you look at the backyard and the grass, there's really no tall grasses or weeds. This is very minimal There's so many roots over here on this east side in the back where the maples are. So many roots that we can't even mow. We have to do it by hand. The property boundary is approximately here between the two lines of trees, and so the neighbor is doing his best to maintain his part, but you can clearly see it's not all ours anyways. So there you have it. That's our property. That's what it looks like. I really don't see any reason to pick on us other than being redneck pieces of crap bullies.